What's going on, everybody? I just finished cleaning the background. You guys are always giving me crap about how dirty my place is. Scrubbed everything down and it looks a little bit better. Rest of the apartment looks like trash, but you guys can't see, so it doesn't matter. Now let's talk about color grading. It can be a little bit complicated, but if you get it down, you can make this camera look more like this camera and this camera to look even better. And it's probably the cheapest way to step up the level of your footage. Amazing color grades can take hours to do, and professionals spend days and days perfecting every little shot, but hey, I'm a YouTuber, I'm lazy. I'm trying to pump these videos out, and after a full day of sitting in front of the computer editing, last thing I wanna do is spend another couple hours tweaking little colors on shots. Grading can be a little bit tricky on your eyes too. I mean, you may look at it and be like, hey, that looks really good, walk away, come back a few hours later and be like, oh my God, that looks terrible. I wasted a lot of time doing that. So without further ado, this is my lazy man's guide on how to do a very quick color grade that actually looks pretty dang good, while I shamelessly plug my LUT package that is now for sale. In case you don't know what LUTs are, they're basically like filters, kind of like the ones you see on Instagram for your photos, but they're designed for professional video use. You can do this with any LUTs of your choice. There's plenty of other packages out there, but I don't want you to know that, so please act like I didn't say anything. I need money. A majority of editing software can use LUTs now: Final Cut, After Effects, DaVinci Resolve. My weapon of choice is Adobe Premiere, simply because it's the one I'm most comfortable with, but the fundamentals are pretty much the same across the board. All right, so now we got our short sequence up and ready. We're gonna go up top and switch to the color workspace to get started, since we're color grading, and we're gonna start off by creating an adjustment layer. There we go. Nice. All right, so adjustment layers are awesome. I recently started using them. I wish I knew about them sooner, but basically they take everything underneath that layer and apply a certain filter to it. So for example, if I take the adjustment layer and make it super bright, then everything underneath that adjustment layer blanket gets super bright. And that's gonna be a huge time saver if you're currently going into each clip and grading them individually. One of the first things you're gonna wanna do is look for the look or style you're gonna wanna go for, and don't go and color grade every little clip differently. That's just gonna be jarring. Try to think of the type of look you're going for, and at least for that scene, stick with that. And also don't overdo it either. You can immediately tell an amateur color grade because they do too much to it. So with that in mind, let's get to grading. So again, we're on this color workspace. We're gonna go over to the basic correction, double check that your adjustment layer is selected. So whatever we do here gets applied to the adjustment layer and not some random clip. Now we're gonna hit this input LUT, and that's where we're gonna put our potato jet LUT. Nobody else's LUTs, just the potato jet LUT. All right, so we're gonna expand the LUT menu and hit browse, and we can make our way over to the best LUTs in the world. We're gonna sample through a couple of them. Ooh, this one looks way too yellow. Let's try Kona. Looks a little bit better. Palm Springs seems a little bit more hipstery. There's a couple other amazing LUTs you can go through, but for now, why don't we go with Kona? It looks pretty solid. Kona generally makes everything feel brighter and warmer, so let's go with that for this video. But you rarely want a LUT to be at full strength at 100%, so we can go over to this opacity of the adjustment layer, drop that down a little bit. So now it's just at 75%, looking pretty clean now. Remember that oftentimes less is more, and now this whole sequence has this kind of stylistic flair, but this one shot is kind of sticking out. It's a little bit darker than the rest, so I'm gonna select the clip, not the adjustment layer, but just this clip specifically, and let's go into the curves, and I'm just gonna bump it up a little bit, brighten it back up, try to get it to match the others. You don't have to use curves. You can use exposure or highlights or shadows, whatever tools you like, but generally you just kind of want everything to have a similar matching exposure. I use curves because it's what I'm familiar with. And there you go, within seconds, you have a sequence color graded. All right, why don't we look at the next batch of clips? It's a new scene, so let's give it a different look. I'm dropping in a fresh adjustment layer so we can start new. And let's go ahead and try out some LUTs. Skyscraper is a cooler one, but let's go for something a little bit more poppy. Let's try urban. Super saturated, super vibrant, super contrasty. Pretty fun image, so it kind of works. I'm gonna pull it back a little bit though. It's just a little bit too much, so let's find a good middle ground. All right, it's looking pretty good. And if you guys ever wanna take it a step forward, even after you add the LUT, you can always go in and make tweaks to make it even more specific to your shot. Sometimes I'll add a little vignette to bring the focus a little bit more to the center of the shot. And it's definitely not hard to spend a ton of time color grading, so I'm just gonna blow through these real quick. I'm letting the LUTs do 90% of the color grade, and I'm just making the minor tweaks per shot if needed. Just that little bit adds so much pop to the shot. Pretty freaking easy, right? Perfect for a lazy man such as myself. Most of these shots are already looking pretty good with just that LUT filter, but since we're here, I might as well just quickly blow through these real quick. These 3 shots don't seem to work great with Urban. She's in the shade, so I'm actually gonna pull that adjustment layer off. We're gonna start fresh again. Let's try adding the Gold Rush LUT this time. Gold Rush tends to work pretty well with, especially if there's a lot of greens, makes everything gold. Oh, what a surprise. Gold Rush is a pretty strong filter, so we're definitely gonna need to dial that way down. And let's go and readjust the exposure just a little bit, trying to keep this whole video bright. And now this is already the 3rd look for this video. I usually try to stick to just 1 or 2 LUTs per video, but hey, we're going all out today. By the way, this footage we're editing right now is shot on the Red camera, but no matter what camera you're shooting on, your workflow is gonna be pretty similar. And boom, there you have it, a video that is color graded with some style, and most importantly, only took a few minutes to do, so easy to incorporate into your workflow. This is how I like to apply everything in Premiere, but even if you're on Final Cut or whatever software, just look at how to apply the LUT and how to adjust how strong that LUT is, and then just make a little tweak to it, you know, make it yours. By the way, if you guys end up getting my set of LUTs, you get the 8 that we kind of talked about here. These are the ones I would suggest you use. If you're shooting on a log format like S-Log2, S-Log3, or C-Log or whatever, there is a log format version of these LUTs, but I don't really suggest you use them. Since logs are so different, like S-Log2 is very different from S-Log3, which is very different from C-Log, which is different from Log C. So many different logs out there that it's really hard to make a log LUT that works well with a majority of logs. Keep in mind that when I was creating these LUTs, I was designing it to work well with standard colored footage. For example, on here, I just leave the color profile on standard, which looks pretty decent right out of camera, but then I just nudge it in the right direction to give it a certain feel or texture. So here's an example. This is red log footage. Red log is a lot flatter than most log picture profiles out there. So let's say we go in to the log version of the LUTs and apply the rainforest LUT. Now the filter might apply well on some log footage, but again, these LUTs don't know what kind of log it's trying to grade. So let me show you how I would suggest doing it. Let's reset. So here we are back at square one, looking at Jonathan's uncolor graded face. We're gonna create an adjustment layer. We're gonna take it, drop it on top of the clip just like we did before, but this time we're gonna bring in another adjustment layer and stack it on top. Now I'm gonna peel back this top layer for a second because it's not in play yet. I'll bring that back in a minute, but we're gonna be working with this middle layer first. Now with the middle layer selected, we're gonna go and just do a rough grade. We're gonna add some contrast back in and getting it back to the point where it looks pretty decent again. Up on the top left is Lumetri Scopes. I suggest you guys learn what that is. It may look like a super complicated alien language trying to communicate with you, but it's actually very simple. On here, up high is something that's very bright, and down low is something that's dark. So let's say we bring up the exposure for a second, everything goes up. And if the image is dark, it's all at the bottom. It's pretty useful to see if your shot is under or overexposed and if anything's blown out. Contrast is looking pretty good, so let's just bring in a little bit of saturation, and now this footage is looking pretty decent. So now we're gonna bring in that top adjustment layer back in, and we're gonna go ahead and apply the standard rainforest LUT to it. Now there we go, that looks so much better. The filter is still coming on a little bit too overpowering, so just like before, we're gonna take the adjustment layer and drop that opacity, and we can dial it exactly to where we want it. Now the reason why we're using multiple adjustment layers instead of just throwing everything into one is because the order these filters are applied really makes a big difference. I'm gonna peel these adjustment layers back, and remember the bottom one is the basic correction and the top one is the forest correction. So we're adding contrast and saturation to it first and then shifting it over green a little bit. Now, when you stack adjustment layers, the bottom ones get applied first. So if we switch up the order, you can see that the colors kind of get messed up a little bit. So remember that you always want to add your contrast and saturation first, then apply these LUTs. So why do we need 2 adjustment layers? I'm going to delete one for now just to show you. If I take the basic correction adjustment layer and apply the LUT, you can see that it applies the LUT and then applies all the contrast and saturation and all that stuff afterwards. You can tell because all the colors are mashed together, all messed up, and Jonathan's skin looks all green like an alien. Jonathan might be an alien. I wouldn't be too surprised if he was. So going back to our graded clips, here's the before and after. Still very simple, easy to do. And yeah, I don't know if that was enough plugging up my LUTs for personal benefit reasons. So in case that wasn't, here is a reel of the looks you can get out of using the LUTs.